My name is Julia, and I'm 44 years old. If you had met me 10 years ago, you'd have seen a woman full of life, a mother who believed that love, sacrifice, and hard work could overcome anything. I raised my daughter, Brielle, entirely on my own after losing my husband, Daniel, when she was just 7. His passing was sudden, a car accident that shattered both our worlds in one phone call. From that day on, I promised myself that Brielle would never feel the void of a missing father. She became my purpose, my reason to wake up every morning, even on the days when grief pressed against my chest like a weight I couldn't breathe beneath. Our life wasn't easy. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, the kind where you can hear your neighbor's television through the walls and where the sound of rain leaks through a cracked window. But it was our home filled with laughter, late-night movie marathons, and the smell of pancakes on Saturday mornings. Brielle and I used to sit on the couch wrapped in a blanket, watching old musicals, and she'd say, "Mom, when I get married, I want you right beside me." I used to smile and tell her, "Always, sweetheart. Always." When Brielle got older, she became even more beautiful than I could have imagined, a mix of her father's calmness and my stubborn heart. She worked hard, earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, and I thought I'd done something right, but everything started to change the day she met Nathan. Nathan was charming, polished, and from a family that practically breathed money. He had the kind of smile that convinced you he cared, but behind it, there was a sharpness, something cold. The first time I met him, I felt it in my gut. He called me ma'am with a smirk, as if the word itself was a joke. His mother, Diane, was even worse, tall, elegant, and dripping with the kind of arrogance that comes from generations of wealth. She sized me up like I was a smudge on her, as designer shoes. From the beginning, I knew I didn't fit into their world. They drove luxury cars, dined at private clubs, and lived behind gates guarded by men in suits. I worked as a hospital receptionist, barely making ends meet, but proud of every honest dollar I earned. Diane never said it outright, but her eyes said enough. I wasn't good enough for their son's fiancé's family. At first, Brielle defended me. She'd say, "Nathan's just trying to make a good impression," or, "Mom, you're overthinking it." But as time passed, her words changed. She started to correct how I spoke at dinner, to roll her eyes when I used casual phrases. She'd mention how Nathan's family does things differently, or that I shouldn't stress too much about appearances. Little by little, the space between us grew wider, and I couldn't find the bridge back to her. When the engagement came, it wasn't a celebration, it was a phone call. I still remember it clearly. I was at work, sorting files, when she called to tell me. Her voice was light but distant. "Mom," Nathan proposed. "We're engaged." I congratulated her with all the joy I could muster, even though I could tell she wasn't calling for my blessing. She was calling out of obligation. Weeks later, an envelope arrived, the wedding invitation. Cream-colored, embossed with gold, elegant in every way. Except my name was printed as Miss Julia Harper instead of Mother of the Bride. I remember staring at it for a long time. There was no mention of family, no note in her handwriting, no personal message. Just a formal invitation, like I was another guest. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. What mattered was seeing my daughter happy. I spent weeks saving for a simple but elegant dress, a soft blue one that matched my eyes. I couldn't afford much, but I wanted Brielle to look at me and see her mother, proud and radiant. I even had my hair done at a salon for the first time in years. As I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I told myself that no matter how out of place I felt, love would always make a space for me. But deep down, I knew something was off. Brielle hadn't called once in the days leading up to the wedding. She didn't ask if I needed a ride or a hotel room. I told myself she was just busy, brides always are. Still, the silence hurt more than I admitted. When the day came, I took a taxi to the venue, a massive estate surrounded by iron gates and security guards. It looked more like a royal palace than a place for two people to say, "I do." As I stepped out of the cab, I felt my stomach twist. Guests were arriving in sleek cars, stepping out in designer gowns and tuxedos. I felt small, invisible, but I lifted my chin and walked forward. The guards asked for my name, checked the list, and exchanged confused looks. My heart started to pound. "I'm the bride's mother," I said, forcing a smile. The guard hesitated, then let me in, though I could tell he wasn't convinced. I clutched my purse, the one with Brielle's gift inside a small gold locket containing a photo of her and her father. I thought she'd want something to remind her of where she came from. As I entered the hall, everything sparkled: crystal chandeliers, white roses, and tables covered in silver linens. People turned to look at me, their gazes sliding over my simple dress like it was something offensive. I tried to spot Brielle among the crowd, but she was nowhere in sight. Nathan's mother was, though, standing tall near the altar, her lips curling into the faintest smirk when she saw me. I suddenly understood. I wasn't welcome there. Still, I stayed. I smiled politely at strangers who ignored me and found a quiet corner near the back. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it would all be worth it once Brielle walked down the aisle. Once she saw me, everything would be okay. We'd hug, we'd cry, and we'd start again. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something terrible was about to happen. I had no idea that stepping into that venue would lead to the most humiliating moment of my life. The venue looked like something out of a royal movie, and I immediately felt like an outsider. The chandeliers hanging above me sparkled like constellations, scattering light across the marble floor. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fresh roses, and the string quartet in the corner played a soft, graceful melody that made every movement feel rehearsed. I stood still for a moment, clutching the small velvet box that held Brielle's locket, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. It wasn't just the luxury that made me uncomfortable, it was the realization that this entire event seemed built to erase any trace of where Brielle came from. Everywhere I looked, people glided around in tailored suits and glittering gowns. I recognized no one. Guests greeted one another with air kisses and laughter that didn't quite reach their eyes. I could feel their gazes slide toward me. A woman in a simple blue dress, her hair done neatly but not expensively, her shoes scuffed from years of wear. I caught snippets of whispers. "Who is she? And maybe the help?" Each word cut deeper than the last. I found an empty seat near the back of the hall, far from the main tables reserved for the groom's family. The card in front of me didn't have my name, it simply read Guest 42. My heart sank, but I told myself it didn't matter. I wasn't here for seating arrangements or appearances. I was here for my daughter. I just needed to see her, to let her know that no matter how far she drifted, I was still standing in her corner. After a few minutes, I gathered my courage and went in search of Brielle. The event coordinator, a young woman in a black headset and clipboard in hand, intercepted me near the corridor. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, smiling, politely. "Can I help you?" "Yes," I said, clutching the velvet box a little tighter. "I'm looking for my daughter, Brielle Harper, the bride." Her smile faltered. "Oh, are you family?" "I'm her mother," I replied softly. The woman's brows drew together in confusion, her eyes flicking down to her list. "I'm sorry. Could you give me your full name?" "Julia Harper." Her finger trailed down the paper once, then twice. "I'm not seeing your name here. Are you sure you're on the guest list?" The words hit me like a slap. "Of course I'm sure," I said, forcing calm into my voice. "I received an invitation. I'm her mother." The coordinator hesitated, glancing toward the stage where Nathan stood speaking with his groomsmen. His expression changed when he saw me, a quick flicker of annoyance followed by a smug smirk. He leaned toward one of the security guards and whispered something. I could feel the blood draining from my face. "I'm sure it's just an oversight," I murmured to the coordinator. "Please, I just want to see my daughter before the ceremony." Before she could respond, Nathan himself began walking toward us. His expression was polite on the surface but laced with venom underneath. "Julia," he said smoothly. "You made it." "Yes," I said, trying to smile. "I wouldn't miss my daughter's wedding for the world." He looked me up and down, his mouth twitching. "Well, it's nice that you could come, though I wish we'd known. The seating chart's already full." "I was invited," I insisted. "I have the invitation right here." I reached into my purse, hands trembling slightly, and pulled out the embossed card. He glanced at it and gave a low chuckle. "Oh, right," he said, waving it off. "That must have been sent before we finalized the guest list. You know how chaotic wedding planning can get." I felt heat rising in my chest. "Nathan, I'm her mother." "I know," he said, his voice suddenly sharp. "And we appreciate that. But today's about Brielle. Not family politics. Why don't you grab a drink and stay near the back? You'll have a great view from there." His tone was condescending, dismissive, like I was some distant acquaintance instead of the woman who raised his bride. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to nod. "Of course," I said softly. "I'll stay out of the way." He smiled, that same empty smile that had fooled my daughter, and turned back to his friends. I watched him walk away, laughter bubbling from his lips like nothing had happened. The coordinator shifted awkwardly beside me. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said gently. "If you need anything, I'll do my best." "Thank you," I whispered. I returned to my seat, feeling smaller than I ever had before. Inside was the locket, gold, simple, with a tiny engraving of a heart. Inside were two small photos. One of Brielle at 10, missing a front tooth, and one of Daniel, smiling from a time when our lives still made sense. I closed it and pressed it against my palm. The ceremony began shortly after. Guests stood as the music swelled, and there she was, my daughter, radiant in white lace, her smile wide but strangely distant. My breath caught. She was stunning, almost unrecognizable, like someone I'd lost a long time ago. She didn't look my way once. As she passed by, I felt invisible, a ghost in the crowd. I wanted to believe that when the vows were said and the photos taken, she'd come find me. That she'd hug me and whisper, "I'm sorry for how things have been." But deep down, I sensed it wouldn't happen. Something about the way Nathan's eyes flicked toward me during the ceremony, a glint of irritation, almost hatred, told me this day wasn't just about their union. It was about erasing me from her story. When the ceremony ended and guests began filing toward the reception, I lingered near the back, waiting for a moment to give her the locket. I rehearsed what I'd say. "This is for you, sweetheart. A piece of where you came from." But before I could move, I noticed Nathan talking to the security guards again, his expression dark. He pointed in my direction. One of them nodded. A chill ran through me. That's when Nathan made a scene in front of everyone, and I felt my world collapse. "Get her out of here!" Nathan's voice thundered through the hall, and every head turned toward me. At first, I thought I'd misheard him. The laughter and chatter around me stopped instantly, and a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself froze. I stood there, clutching the small velvet box against my chest, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The guards he had been whispering to earlier began walking toward me, their faces expressionless, their movements firm and deliberate. "Nathan," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me with a sneer, a look that was equal parts triumph and disgust. "I told you to leave," he said loudly, making sure everyone in that glittering ballroom could hear him. "You weren't supposed to be here." My mouth went dry. I'm Brielle's mother." "Really?" he said with mock surprise, glancing at the guests who were now whispering among themselves. "Because according to the guest list, her mother didn't RSVP. You just showed up, crashing a wedding that's low, even for you." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the room. I could see faces turning toward each other, hands covering mouths. It felt like a dream, like I'd suddenly stepped into someone else's nightmare. I looked desperately toward Brielle, who stood near the main table beside her bridesmaids. Her face was pale, eyes wide with shock. "Brielle," I said softly, almost a plea. "Tell them." But she didn't move. She didn't speak. Her silence pierced deeper than any insult Nathan could throw. I could see her trembling, her hands clutching her bouquet so tightly that the stems bent under the pressure, but she didn't look at me. Nathan laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "You see?" he said to the crowd. "Even Brielle doesn't want you here. This is her day, not a place for drama or pity." The guards reached me, their large hands hovering just inches from my arm. I backed away instinctively, shaking my head. "Please," I whispered. "Don't do this. I just wanted to see my daughter. I won't cause trouble." "Ma'am," one of the guards said quietly, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry, but we've been asked to escort you out." I could feel hundreds of eyes burning into me. Someone whispered, "How embarrassing." Another voice said, "That poor woman." I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. My legs felt weak, and I could barely keep myself from collapsing. I turned to Brielle again, tears clouding my vision. "Sweetheart, please," I begged. "It's me, it's Mom." Her lips parted, but no words came out. Nathan's hand went to her shoulder, squeezing gently as if to remind her of her new allegiance. She looked down at the floor. Something inside me broke. The guard's grip tightened slightly, and I stumbled forward. The small velvet box slipped from my hand, falling onto the marble floor with a sharp, echoing clink. The lid popped open, and the golden locket rolled across the ground, catching the light. For a moment, everyone's gaze followed it, a tiny, glinting symbol of everything I was losing. Nathan's smirk widened. "Let's not make a bigger scene than you already have," he said. "You've embarrassed yourself enough." My cheeks burned, and tears began to spill freely now. I bent down to pick up the locket, my fingers trembling, but the guard gently pulled me upright. "Please," he said quietly. "Let's go. I just wanted to give her this," I whispered, holding up the locket in my palm. "It's from her father." My voice cracked, the words breaking apart mid-sentence. Nathan rolled his eyes. "Oh, please. Save the sentimental act. We all know why you're here, to remind everyone that you're the poor widow, playing the victim. This wedding isn't your stage." His words cut through me like knives. The people around us stared in silence, some with pity, others with judgment. I could feel my dignity slipping away, replaced by an unbearable ache. The guards began guiding me toward the doors. I stumbled slightly, still holding onto the locket as if it were my last piece of strength. My heart screamed for Brielle to speak, to do something. But when I turned back for one last look, she was frozen in place, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. "I love you, Brielle," I said softly, my voice shaking. "I always have, and I always will," Nathan scoffed audibly. "Security," he snapped. "Get her out of here now." The crowd parted as I was led through the center of the hall, the same aisle where my daughter had just walked moments earlier in her white gown. Only now, instead of joy, there was shame. Instead of music, there was silence broken only by whispers. Each step felt heavier than the last. I kept my head down, tears splashing onto the floor. My chest ached so much I could barely breathe. When we reached the large double doors, one of the guards paused, his grip softening slightly. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," he said, almost whispering. I nodded weakly. "It's not your fault." The doors began to swing open, and the cold air from outside rushed in, chilling my skin. My body trembled not from the cold, but from the realization that I was being erased from my daughter's life in front of hundreds of strangers. I turned back one last time, hoping for a miracle, a word, a glance, anything from Brielle. But she didn't move. Nathan had his arm around her now, whispering something in her ear, and she just stood there, eyes glassy, lost. A sob caught in my throat as the guards began to push the doors open wider. As the doors swung open to throw me out, an unexpected voice stopped everything. "Touch that woman again, and you'll regret it." The deep, commanding voice cut through the air like thunder. Every head turned toward the grand entrance of the ballroom, where a tall man stood framed in the doorway. The security guards froze mid-step, their hands still on my arms. The guests began murmuring, craning their necks to see who had just walked in with such authority. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized him. The last time I'd seen that face was more than a decade ago, square jaw, intense eyes, that unmistakable stance of someone who'd spent his life in uniform. "Mark?" I whispered, disbelief flooding my voice. It was him, my late husband's younger brother, Mark Evans. He'd been overseas for years, serving as a senior officer in the military. The family hadn't heard from him in ages, not even Brielle. He wasn't supposed to be here. He didn't even know about the wedding. At least, that's what I thought. Mark walked forward slowly, his presence commanding silence. His dark suit contrasted sharply against his weathered features, and though he looked older, the authority in his eyes was exactly as I remembered. Every step he took echoed across the marble floor, heavy and deliberate. The guards immediately released me and stepped back. Nathan's confident expression faltered for the first time since the day began. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain control of the moment. "Excuse me," Nathan said, his voice shaky but still dripping with arrogance. "Who do you think you are, barging into my wedding?" Mark stopped a few feet away from us, his gaze fixed on Nathan. "I'm Mark Evans," he said evenly. "The brother of Daniel Evans, Brielle's father. And that woman you just tried to throw out?" He gestured toward me. "She's my sister-in-law. You're lucky I got here when I did." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. The sound of whispers filled the air again, the kind of whispers that travel faster than sound itself. "Her husband's brother? Military?" "He looks furious." Nathan blinked, clearly rattled. "Oh, so your family," he said with an unconvincing smile. "Good to know. But this is a private event, and she—" Mark cut him off. "Private event?" His tone was sharp. "You threw the bride's own mother out in front of hundreds of people. You call that private?" Nathan's jaw tightened. She wasn't invited. Mark took a step closer. "I've seen cowards before," he said quietly, his voice low but seething with restrained fury. "They always hide behind rules they invent to protect their egos." The silence that followed was suffocating. Diane, Nathan's mother, stood up from her seat near the front, her expression tight and nervous. "Mark, is it?" she said, trying to keep her composure. "I think you're misunderstanding the situation." Julia was confused. "We didn't want any disruptions during the ceremony." "Disruption?" Mark turned toward her, eyes narrowing. "You call publicly humiliating a grieving mother a disruption? You should be ashamed." For the first time all evening, Diane didn't have a reply. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she sat back down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The room was utterly still. The only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then Mark turned back to me. His expression softened slightly. "Are you all right, Julia?" he asked gently. I nodded, though my voice failed me. My throat was too tight to speak. He stepped beside me, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder, a silent promise that no one would touch me again. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Nathan tried to recover his confidence, his tone growing defensive. "This isn't your business," he snapped. "You don't know what's been going on between us." Julia has a history of Mark's glare silenced him instantly. "Don't you dare finish that sentence," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You think I came here without knowing who you are? You think I just stumbled into this?" Nathan blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Mark turned toward the guests, his voice carrying across the hall with steady authority. "I came because I got a call from someone who's been watching you and your family for months, and what I know about you, Nathan, is a lot darker than what anyone here believes." The tension in the room spiked. Guests began murmuring again, the kind of low buzz that signaled scandal brewing. Diane looked around, clearly panicked. "This is ridiculous," she said quickly. "He's trying to ruin our son's wedding." Mark ignored her. His eyes stayed locked on Nathan's. "I've dealt with men like you before, men who hide behind charm, money, and lies. But it always catches up to them. Always." Nathan's confidence crumbled, his smirk fading completely. "You don't know anything about me," he said weakly. Mark stepped closer until he was just a foot away. "I know enough," he said. "And so do the people who called me this morning." The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The guards looked uncertain, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Brielle, still standing by the table, finally spoke for the first time. Her voice was small but trembling. "Uncle Mark?" she whispered. I didn't even know you were coming." Mark looked at her with gentler eyes. I didn't either, sweetheart. But when I found out what kind of man you were marrying, I couldn't stay away. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? Nathan's panic was now visible, his hand tightening around her arm. Don't listen to him, he said quickly. He's lying. Mark's next words sliced through the chaos like a blade. No, Nathan. I'm telling the truth. And before this night is over, everyone here will know it. Gasps filled the room again. I felt a chill run through me. Whatever Mark knew, whatever he had discovered, it wasn't just about family tension or social class. It was something far deeper. I looked at him, my voice barely a whisper. Mark, what did you find out? He glanced at me, his expression grim. The truth, Julia. The truth about this man and his family. But Mark wasn't there just to defend me, he came with a truth that would change everything. Mark's voice was steady but filled with controlled rage as he addressed the crowd. Every eye in the ballroom was locked on him. Nathan's confident mask was cracking, his face pale and his hands twitching at his sides. Diane's knuckles were white as she clutched her clutch bag, her jaw tight with the kind of fear only the guilty know. The hum of whispered curiosity rippled through the guests' curiosity that was quickly giving way to unease. Mark turned slightly, scanning the crowd before fixing his gaze on Nathan. You've spent months convincing this young woman and her mother that you're some perfect, respectable man, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. But behind all this glamour, behind the flowers, the champagne, and your fake smiles, there's rot. And I have proof. Diane shot to her feet. This is outrageous, she cried. You have no right to come in here and… Sit down, Mark snapped, his voice so sharp and commanding that it sliced through her protest like a knife. The room fell dead silent again. You've had your say for years, Diane. Now it's my turn. I could see Nathan's throat bob as he swallowed hard, trying to mask his fear with an unconvincing smirk. You're bluffing, he muttered. You don't know what you're talking about. Mark took a folded envelope from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the nearest table. The sound of the paper hitting the glass surface made everyone flinch. That, Mark said, pointing to it, is a copy of an ongoing financial investigation. The company your father runs, the one you claim is the backbone of your family's success, has been under federal scrutiny for nearly a year. Gasps erupted from the guests. Diane's composure cracked. She took a step back, her lips parting in disbelief. That's a lie, she said weakly. There's no investigation. Oh, there is, Mark interrupted. And it's very real. Fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, take your pick. Your family's business empire was built on dirty money. Your father's been moving assets through shell corporations overseas for years. I know, because I've been helping the authorities track it. Nathan's entire body stiffened. You're lying, he stammered, though his voice lacked conviction. Mark gave a humorless smile. I spent 15 years in military intelligence. I don't make claims I can't back up. The room filled with gasps, phones began coming out of pockets, and the soft buzz of whispers spread like wildfire. I saw Brielle turn to Nathan, her face a mixture of confusion and horror. Nathan, is that true? She asked, her voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just stared at Mark, jaw locked, fists clenched. The silence stretched unbearably long before he finally muttered, You don't know anything about us. You don't know what my father's done for. Mark cut him off. What your father's done? You mean laundering millions while preaching about integrity? Or maybe bribing officials to keep his business afloat? I know exactly what you're round. Father's done, Nathan. And soon, everyone else will too. Diane's face turned ashen. She turned to her son in disbelief. Nathan, she hissed. Tell him he's wrong. Tell them he's lying. But Nathan couldn't. His silence spoke louder than any denial could. Brielle took a shaky step backward. No, she whispered, shaking her head. This can't be happening. You told me your family was honest, that your father was a good man. Her eyes filled with tears. You lied to me. Nathan reached for her hand, but she jerked it away. Brielle, listen to me. No, she cried, her voice breaking. You've been lying to me for years, haven't you? Is that why you didn't want Mom here? Because you were afraid someone would see through your act? The crowd's whispers turned louder now, scandal, betrayal, disbelief filling every corner of the ballroom like a growing storm. I could see reporters' assistants among the guests, people already pulling out their phones, typing furiously. Diane grabbed Nathan's arm, whispering something urgently, but he shook her off. Mark wasn't finished. I didn't just come here to expose your family's crimes, he said, turning his attention to Brielle now. I came here because I couldn't let Daniel's daughter, my niece, marry into a family that would destroy her. The mention of Daniel's name made my breath hitch. I hadn't heard his name spoken aloud in so long. For a second, I could almost feel him in the room as if he were standing beside his brother, silently protecting us both. Brielle's lips trembled as she looked from Mark to me, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. Mom, she whispered, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know, sweetheart, I said softly, finally finding my voice. I know you didn't. Mark turned back to Nathan one final time. It's over, he said flatly. The authorities are on their way. You can try to talk your way out of this, but your father won't be able to protect you this time. Nathan's face contorted in fury. You think you can just walk in here and ruin everything? He shouted, stepping forward. You don't know who you're dealing with. Mark didn't flinch. Yes, I do, he said calmly. A coward, a liar, a man who built his world on deceit and thought no one would notice. For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then, outside the grand windows of the ballroom, I heard the faint wail of sirens approaching, growing louder by the second. The color drained completely from Diane's face. Guests started murmuring, backing away toward the exits. Mark exhaled slowly and looked at me, his voice low but firm. It's going to be okay now, Julia. I promise. Brielle covered her mouth with trembling hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. Oh my God, she whispered, her voice breaking. What have I done? And then, cutting through the chaos, the unmistakable sound of police sirens filled the air outside, echoing across the estate like a storm breaking loose. Before the truth could fully unfold, police sirens echoed outside the venue. The moment the police walked in, the celebration turned into confusion and panic. The double doors burst open, and a group of uniformed officers stepped inside, their boots clicking against the marble floor. The echo of those footsteps silenced the last of the whispers. For a second, everyone froze, the image of elegance and glamour collapsing under the weight of reality. I stood there beside Mark, still trying to process what was happening. The flashing red and blue lights from outside painted the crystal chandeliers with streaks of color, making the entire scene look surreal, like the world had cracked open inside that ballroom. One of the officers called out, voice firm and clear. Where is Nathan Caldwell? All heads turned toward the groom. He tried to maintain composure, but his trembling hands gave him away. His father, Richard Caldwell, rose from his seat at the front, stepping protectively in front of his son. There must be some mistake, Richard said sharply. This is a private event. One of the officers pulled out a folded paper. We have a warrant for your arrest, Mr. Caldwell. Charges include tax evasion, fraud, and money laundering. The words hit like thunder. Guests gasped. Some stood up. Others instinctively began inching toward the exits. Diane clutched her pearls and shouted, You can't do this! My husband is a respected businessman. This is slander. Mark's tone was calm but cutting. You should have thought about respect before you built your fortune on lies. The officers stepped forward. Richard's defiance faltered when one officer read him his rights in a steady voice. The grand hall that had once echoed with music now reverberated with the sound of law and consequence. As Richard was handcuffed, Nathan's composure cracked completely. This is insane, he shouted, stepping forward. You can't arrest my father here, this is my wedding. Mark faced him, unflinching. Your wedding was built on deceit. It's only fitting it ends in truth. The guests began leaving hurriedly, whispering to one another. Phones pressed to their ears. The once pristine floor was now littered with spilled champagne and crumpled napkins. Brielle stood frozen, her bouquet hanging limply in her hand. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with disbelief. Mom, she whispered finally, turning toward me. What's happening? I took her hand gently, my own trembling. The truth, sweetheart, I said softly. The truth is finally coming out. Her lips quivered. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said. You were blinded by love. It happens to the best of us. Nathan turned on Mark, his voice rising again. You had no right to come here. You don't know what you've done. Mark stepped closer, his tone low but dangerous. I know exactly what I've done. I stopped a decent woman's daughter from marrying into corruption. Nathan's eyes burned with fury. You think this is over? You think you can just destroy us? This isn't destruction, Mark said coldly. This is justice. The officers led Richard toward the door. Cameras from guests' phones flashed, capturing the fall of one of the city's most respected men. Diane screamed as she tried to reach him, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. Richard, tell them it's a mistake. But he didn't even look back. Nathan stood there, trembling, staring after his father. His face twisted with rage, grief, and disbelief all at once. He turned back to Brielle, his voice breaking. You did this, he said. You and your mother, you've ruined my life. Brielle flinched. No, Nathan, she said softly. You did that yourself. The music that had been playing faintly in the background stopped. The band members had fled, leaving their instruments abandoned. Guests poured out through the side doors, muttering words like scandal and arrest under their breath. The scent of roses and perfume was now overpowered by the sterile smell of fear. Diane, still in denial, grabbed Nathan's arm. We'll fix this, she said, her voice trembling. We'll get lawyers, Mrs. Caldwell, one of the officers interrupted. You might want to come with us for questioning as well. Her face turned ashen. What? You're listed as an active board member of Caldwell Enterprises, the officer said. We'll need your statement. Diane's eyes darted wildly between Nathan and me. This is your fault, she hissed at me. You've destroyed everything. I met her glare with a calm she couldn't understand. No, I said quietly. The truth, did. She was escorted out behind her husband, still shouting as the officers led them toward the waiting police cars outside. The crowd had thinned now, leaving only a few stunned onlookers, including Brielle, Mark, and me. Nathan stood motionless for a long moment, then turned his fury back on me. You think you've won? He snarled. You think you can humiliate me like this and walk away? My chest tightened. I didn't want to humiliate you, Nathan. I wanted to protect my daughter. His eyes darkened, his voice lowering to a venomous whisper. You'll regret this, both of you. You've said enough, he warned. If you even think about coming near them again, you'll regret it. Two officers moved toward Nathan, and this time, he didn't resist. His shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, and he hung his head, muttering under his breath as they led him away. Brielle broke down completely, falling into my arms. Her sobs racked her body as I held her close, stroking her hair like I used to when she was little. It's okay, baby, I whispered. It's over now. But as I looked around at the wreckage of her wedding, the toppled chairs, the half-eaten cake, the abandoned decorations, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. Because Nathan wasn't the kind of man who gave up easily. And the look he gave me before disappearing through those doors told me exactly that. But Nathan wasn't done. He turned his rage toward me with one final threat. This isn't over, Julia. You'll regret ever showing up, Nathan hissed as the officers restrained him. His words slithered through the air like venom, and even the officers seemed to pause for a fraction of a second. His face was twisted, eyes bloodshot, the charm he once wore like a mask completely gone. What stood before me wasn't the polished, confident Groom anymore, it was a man, stripped of every lie he'd built his identity on. The officers gripped his arms tighter, but he still managed to lean forward, his voice low enough that only I could hear. You think you're better than me, he spat. You and your pathetic daughter, but I'll make sure neither of you ever forget this day. I met his glare. You've already made sure of that, Nathan. He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll see. He muttered darkly before one of the officers finally pulled him back. Brielle clung to me, her tears dampening my shoulder. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she kept whispering. I didn't know who he really was. I didn't know any of this. I held her tighter, trying to stay strong for her even as my own emotions crumbled inside. "You don't have to apologize for loving someone," I said softly. "You just have to promise you'll never let someone like him fool you again." She nodded against my chest, her shoulders shaking. I could feel the heartbreak in her trembling body, and it broke me to see her like that. Mark stayed close, his eyes following Nathan as the police guided him toward the exit. Nathan jerked against their grip, shouting curses, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You'll pay for this, all of you, I swear it." "Enough," one of the officers barked, shoving him forward. But Nathan wasn't finished. He turned one last time before they pushed him through the doors, his gaze burning into mine. "Enjoy your little victory, Julia," he snarled. "Because when this is over, I'll take everything from you." The doors slammed shut behind him, and the sound reverberated through the silent hall like a final, cruel punctuation mark. Brielle let out a choked sob, sinking to her knees. The white fabric of her gown pooled around her, now stained and wrinkled. She looked so small, so fragile, and for a moment, I saw the little girl who used to hide behind me, when thunderstorms scared her. I knelt beside her, brushing her hair from her face. "It's okay, sweetheart," I whispered. "He can't hurt us anymore." She shook her head weakly. "He will. You saw the way he looked at you, he meant it." Mark crouched beside us. "He's not going to do anything," he said firmly. "He'll be behind bars for a long time." But his voice, calm and steady as it was, couldn't erase the unease twisting in my chest. I'd seen that kind of hatred before, the kind that didn't fade with time. Police officers were still moving in and out of the hall, taking statements, asking questions, documenting the chaos. Guests who hadn't fled yet stood in small clusters, whispering and pointing, their curiosity tinged with fear. The grandeur of the evening had turned to ashes. Diane was gone, escorted out moments after her son, still shrieking that it was all lies. The band had left, the food sat untouched, and the floral arrangements that once filled the air with fragrance now seemed out of place among the wreckage of the night. Mark finally exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Well," he said grimly, "I didn't think I'd end up at a wedding and a crime scene on the same night." I gave a weak laugh through my tears, the sound hollow. "Neither did I." Brielle managed a faint smile, though her eyes were still red and puffy. "I thought today was going to be the happiest day of my life," she murmured. "Now I just want to forget it ever happened." "You won't forget it," I said gently. "But maybe one day it won't hurt as much." She nodded slowly, taking a shaky breath. "I don't deserve your kindness after everything I did, after I let him treat you that way." I cupped her face in my hands. "You're my daughter. There's nothing you could ever do that would make me stop loving you." Tears spilled down her cheeks again as she threw her arms around me. We stayed like that for a long time, mother and daughter, surrounded by shattered dreams and silent witnesses. When we finally stood, the hall was nearly empty. Only a few officers remained, speaking quietly near the doorway. Mark talked with one of them, likely confirming that the Caldwells would be taken directly into custody. As we walked toward the exit, I glanced back one last time at the glittering hall that had once been filled with joy and laughter. Now it was a hollow shell of what it was meant to be, a reminder that sometimes, even the most beautiful things can crumble in an instant. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. Police lights flashed across the night sky, painting everything in red and blue. I could hear reporters shouting questions beyond the gates. Cameras flashed in the distance. Mark escorted us to his car, keeping one protective hand on my shoulder. "I'll drive you both home," he said firmly. But before we could leave, a young officer approached. "Mrs. Harper?" he asked hesitantly. "Mr. Caldwell asked me to give you this." My stomach twisted as he handed me a folded note. I hesitated before opening it. The words were scrawled hastily, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. "You think this is over?" "It's just beginning." My hands trembled as I crumpled the paper. Mark saw my face and immediately took it from me, reading it silently. his jaw clenched. "He's bluffing," he said. But there was tension in his tone. Brielle looked at me fearfully. "What did it say?" "Nothing," I lied softly. "Nothing we need to worry about tonight." She nodded, exhausted, leaning against my shoulder. Mark started the car, and as the lights of the venue disappeared behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that Nathan's words weren't just an empty threat. The calm after the storm was fragile, too fragile. As we stood in the wreckage of her ruined wedding, Brielle made a decision that stunned me. Brielle collapsed in front of me, sobbing that she'd chosen the wrong people over her own mother. It was 2 days after the wedding that Brielle finally broke. We'd been staying at my small apartment, the same one she grew up in, because she refused to go back to the penthouse she'd shared with Nathan. The place felt heavier now, cluttered with memories of simpler times and the faint smell of vanilla candles I used to light when she was little. For the first time in years, she was back in her old room, surrounded by childhood photos and stuffed animals she'd once sworn she was too old to keep. That morning, I found her sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her robe, staring blankly at the floor. Her makeup from the wedding was gone, her hair tied in a messy bun, and her eyes were swollen from crying. The strong, confident woman who had walked down that aisle was gone. In her place sat my little girl, lost, broken, and searching for a way to breathe again. When she saw me, she stood abruptly, her voice cracking. "Mom, I don't even know where to start." I shook my head gently. "You don't have to explain anything right now, sweetheart. Just take your time." But she couldn't hold it in any longer. Her composure shattered. "I was so stupid," she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I thought Nathan loved me. I thought he wanted me, not just my name or the image of being with someone he could control. And I let him take everything from me. My confidence, my voice, you." Before I could answer, she collapsed into my arms, her body shaking with sobs. I held her tightly, feeling her tears soak through my shirt. I stroked her hair the way I used to when she had nightmares as a child. "It's okay," I whispered, though my throat burned. "You're home now, that's all that matters." She pulled back, looking at me through tear-filled eyes. "No, Mom, it's not okay. I treated you like you were beneath me. I let them make me believe you weren't enough. And when Nathan told the guards to throw you out, I froze. I should have stopped him. I should have defended you." I swallowed hard, remembering that moment, her silence, the way she'd looked down as I was dragged away. It was a wound that still ached. But seeing her this broken, I realized she didn't need punishment. She needed forgiveness. "Brielle," I said softly, "you don't owe me anything. I know how people like Nathan work. They make you question yourself, isolate you, twist your love into guilt. You were manipulated, not malicious." She shook her head. "But I wanted so badly to fit into their world. I thought that meant changing who I was, who you were. I thought love meant becoming what he wanted." I smiled sadly. "That's not love, sweetheart. That's control." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything between us finally beginning to lift. The morning sunlight streamed through her curtains, casting long golden shadows on the floor. It felt like the first clean breath after a storm. Mark stopped by that afternoon. He carried 2 cups of coffee and a small grocery bag of pastries. When he saw Brielle, he smiled softly. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "How are you holding up?" She wiped her nose and gave a weak laugh. "Embarrassed, mostly." Mark chuckled gently. "Join the club. I don't think any of us planned on being headline news this week." That made her smile for real, the first genuine one I'd seen since the chaos. Mark set the coffee down and said, "The police are processing everything. Nathan's still in holding, and his parents are under investigation. It's going to take time, but justice will come through." Brielle's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were quiet ones, not from heartbreak, but from relief. "I don't deserve how kind you've both been," she said. "I made so many wrong choices." Mark looked at her with a warmth only family could carry. "You made a human choice to trust. It's what makes you a good person, not a foolish one. Just, next time, trust people who earn it." After he left, Brielle and I sat together at the kitchen table, drinking our coffee. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, it was healing. I reached across the table and took her hand. "There's something I want you to have," I said. I went to my room and came back with the small velvet box. The same one I'd carried to her wedding. Her lips parted when she saw it. "You still have it?" I nodded. It never got where it was meant to go. I opened it slowly and took out the locket. "This belonged to your father. I gave it to him on our first anniversary. I thought maybe now's the time you should have it." Her fingers trembled as I fastened the chain around her neck. She opened it and smiled faintly at the photos inside her father's face on one side, her 10-year-old grin on the other. "I miss him," she whispered. "I do too," I said softly. "But he'd be proud of you. Not because of how perfect your life looked, but because you're finding your strength again." She leaned her head against my shoulder, the warmth of her body reminding me that love, real love, endures even after pain. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The quiet between us was finally peaceful. Just as I began to feel the tightness in my chest ease, something flickered at the edge of my vision. Through the window, across the street, a shadow moved quick and deliberate. I thought maybe it was a passerby at first. But then I noticed the figure linger, standing by the streetlight, watching our building. My heart skipped. "Brielle," I whispered. She lifted her head. "What's wrong?" I didn't want to scare her, so I forced a small smile. "Nothing," I said quickly. "I just thought I saw someone outside." She frowned. "Probably just a neighbor." "Yeah," I said softly, though unease prickled at the back of my neck. "Probably." But as I pulled the curtain closed, I caught one last glimpse of the figure turning away, slow, deliberate, and unmistakably familiar. But as I helped her up, I saw a figure watching us from the shadows. At first, I thought it was one of the officers. But then I recognized the face, Diane. The next evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the living room floor, I went to take out the trash. The air outside was cool, the quiet kind that follows a storm. As I stepped into the hallway, I froze. Standing at the far end, half hidden in the dim light, was a figure I hadn't expected to see again. Diane Caldwell. Her once perfect posture was slumped, her hair disheveled, her eyes swollen as if she hadn't slept in days. Gone were the pearls, the tailored dress, and the commanding presence. In their place stood a woman unraveling, stripped of the image she'd spent her life building. "Diane?" I whispered, my voice a mix of confusion and disbelief. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer at first. Her gaze was cold but desperate, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her designer bag, one of the few remnants of the wealth she once flaunted. She took a hesitant step forward. "I needed to see you," she said, her voice low and brittle. "You destroyed everything." I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "No, Diane, your lies destroyed everything. I just showed up to watch my daughter get married." She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed down the hall. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? That poor, struggling widow who fought against the big, bad, rich family? And now look at you, a hero in the news while I'm the villain." "Because you were the villain," I said quietly. "You humiliated me, let your son manipulate my daughter, and then stood by while he had me dragged out like garbage." Her expression twisted. And for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, not just anger, but guilt. "You don't understand," she said. "Everything I did was to protect my family, to protect Nathan." I shook my head. "From what? The consequences of his actions?" "You didn't protect him, Diane. You enabled him. And now, you've lost everything because of it." Her jaw clenched. "You think I don't know that?" she snapped. "You think I wanted this?" I stayed silent, letting her words hang in the air. She looked away, her voice faltering. "The bank accounts are frozen. The company's being dismantled. Richard's in custody. And Nathan. They're talking about pressing federal charges. He might not get out for years." I felt a twinge of pity, not for her wealth, but for the hollow woman standing before me. "You still have your son," I said softly. That's more than most people get after a fall like this. Her eyes snapped up, glassy and sharp. Don't you dare pity me, Julia. You took everything. My reputation, my home, my friends gone because you couldn't stay in your place. My place? I repeated, disbelief tightening my chest. My place is as a mother who protects her child, something you forgot how to be a long time ago. Diane's lips quivered. He loved her, she whispered, but it sounded more like she was trying to convince herself. Nathan really loved Brielle. Maybe, I said gently, in the only way he knew how. But love isn't control. It's not humiliation, and it's not built on lies. For a long moment, we stood in silence. I could see her shoulders trembling, her breath uneven. Then her voice broke. They're seizing everything, she said quietly. The house, the cars, the accounts, all of it. I have nowhere left to go. There it was, the truth beneath all her bitterness. She wasn't just angry, she was terrified. I softened, just a little. Diane, I said, you might hate me right now, but you still have a choice. You can either drown in this, or you can face it and try to make things right. She let out a humorless laugh. Make things right? I spent decades building my family's image. Now it's over. Maybe that's the point, I said. Maybe it's time to stop pretending. For a fleeting second, her gaze softened, almost human. But then the walls came back up. You'll regret this, she said quietly. You think you've won, but people like you never really win. The world forgets you. The world erases you. I didn't flinch. Maybe, but at least I'll be able to sleep at night. Behind me, the front door opened. Brielle's voice called softly, Mom, is everything okay? Diane's expression hardened again as Brielle stepped into view. My daughter froze at the sight of her. Mrs. Caldwell? She whispered. Diane's tone turned icy. Brielle, you look well. Brielle crossed her arms, her voice steady despite the tension in her face. What are you doing here? I came to see what's left of my son's life, Diane said sharply. To see what kind of woman he threw it away for. Brielle took a small step forward, her eyes glistening but strong. He didn't throw it away for me. He threw it away because he couldn't tell the truth. Diane's composure faltered. You sound just like her, she said bitterly, nodding toward me. Brielle didn't hesitate. That's the best compliment you've ever given me. Diane blinked, and for a moment, her mask cracked completely. She looked lost, fragile. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked down the hallway, her heels clicking weakly against the floor until she disappeared into the fading light outside. I stood there in silence, my heart pounding. Brielle turned to me, tears in her eyes. Do you think she'll be okay? I sighed. I think she'll have to learn what okay means without all that money and power. Maybe that's the only way she'll ever change. We stood together, watching through the window as Diane's silhouette faded into the night. The streetlights flickered above her as she walked away, a woman who had finally lost control of the world she built. As we stepped outside, flashing cameras surrounded us, and I knew our story wasn't over yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages and news alerts. It started before sunrise, the relentless vibration of my phone against the nightstand. For a moment, I thought it was a dream. But when I finally reached for it, the screen glowed with dozens of notifications, texts, missed calls, and headlines. Every major news outlet had picked up the story: wealthy groom arrested at lavish wedding, mother thrown out before FBI raid, bride's family caught in scandal. I scrolled through in disbelief. There were photos of the ballroom, police cars outside, Nathan being led away in handcuffs. One image caught my breath, me, standing near the doors, tears on my face as the guards held my arm. The caption read, Mother of the bride, Julia Harper, caught in family drama that exposed $1 million fraud scheme. For a long moment, I just sat there staring at it. I hadn't asked for this, any of it. I'd only wanted to be there for my daughter. And yet, somehow, my humiliation had turned into something the world couldn't stop talking about. Brielle emerged from her room, wrapped in a blanket, her hair tousled from sleep. Mom, she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. Why is my phone exploding? I handed her mine. She blinked at the screen, scrolling through the endless coverage, her face paling with every headline. "Oh my God," she whispered. "They're everywhere. Nathan. The arrest. Even Uncle Mark's name is trending." Mark had insisted on staying close by for a few days. Just in case. As he put it. When he arrived that morning, coffee in hand, he already knew what had happened. "You're both trending," he said as he set the cups down with a weary smile. "Congratulations, you've gone viral," I groaned softly, rubbing my temples. "That's not exactly something I wanted," he shrugged. "Still, if it helps the truth come out faster, maybe it's not all bad. Public pressure makes people act faster, especially investigators." Brielle sat at the table, scrolling silently for a while before speaking. "People are calling you brave, Mom," she said quietly. "They're saying you stood up to a corrupt family and didn't let them silence you." I blinked, caught off guard. "Brave?" She nodded, showing me a video clip. Someone had recorded the moment Mark interrupted the guards, the exact second everything changed. The clip had already hit over 1 million views. Comments filled the screen. "That mom deserves justice. She's the definition of dignity." The bride's silence broke my heart. I didn't know whether to feel proud or sick. "I didn't do anything heroic," I said. "I just couldn't let them take away what little I had left." Mark smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's all it takes to be brave." The day passed in a blur of interviews, statements, and police follow-ups. Reporters camped outside our apartment building. One of them even left a note under our door asking for the mother's exclusive side of the story. I tore it up without reading further. The last thing I wanted was to turn my family's pain into entertainment. Brielle, on the other hand, did something I didn't expect. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, opened her laptop, and began typing. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm writing a post," she said, her voice steady. "Not for them. For me." When she finished, she read it aloud. It was raw, honest, and full of emotion. I was blinded by love and pride. I hurt my mother, the only person who's ever truly stood by me. But she showed me what strength looks like, not wealth, not power, but love that doesn't break when the world turns its back on you. She posted it. And within hours, it spread like wildfire. Thousands of people commented, some sharing their own stories about toxic relationships and manipulation. Others sent messages of support. One comment read, "Your mom is a warrior. Don't ever let go of her again." For the first time in days, Brielle smiled a real smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe something good can come out of all this," she said softly. Mark nodded. Truth has a way of setting things right, even when it takes the long road. Later that night, as the world continued to talk about us, we sat on the couch together, exhausted but lighter somehow. Brielle leaned her head against my shoulder. "I feel like I can finally breathe again," she murmured. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You can, sweetheart. The worst is behind us now." But as soon as I said it, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a news alert or a text. It was an email, no subject, no sender name, just a single line in the body. "You'll never escape what you did to me." I stared at the words, my stomach dropping. My hands trembled as I closed the message and set the phone face down on the table. "Mom?" Brielle asked, noticing my change in expression. "What's wrong?" I forced a small smile. "Nothing, honey. Just tired." But sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Nathan's face, the fury, the promise in his eyes as he was dragged away. I told myself it was just fear talking, that he couldn't reach us anymore. And yet, as I lay awake listening to the hum of the city outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't finished. But one unexpected message changed the course of our lives once again. A few weeks later, a letter arrived from prison from Nathan himself. It came in a plain white envelope, the kind that looked harmless at first glance. No return address, no official stamp, just my name. Handwritten in a rushed, jagged scrawl I recognized immediately. I stared at it for a long time before touching it. The air in the room felt heavier, as if the paper itself carried the echoes of that awful night. Brielle was at work when it arrived. She'd just started a part-time position at a community center, something to keep her busy while she tried to rebuild her life. Mark was visiting a nearby military base, so it was just me at home, alone with my thoughts and the envelope. I told myself I shouldn't open it. That nothing inside could bring peace. Only pain. But curiosity or maybe closure got the better of me. My hands trembled as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. It began without greeting. No, dear Julia. No, dear Mrs. Harper. Just words, written in an angry, uneven script that dug into the paper like claws. You think you've won. You think you destroyed me. But you don't understand what you've started. I could almost hear his voice in every stroke of ink, the same cold arrogance that once charmed my daughter, now stripped bare of its polish. Everyone turned on me. My family, my lawyers, even my mother. You ruined everything I built. Brielle ruined me. And all because you couldn't keep your nose out of what wasn't your business. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep reading. Do you think the world loves you now? They'll forget you, Julia. People like you always fade. You'll spend your life being the poor widow who took down the rich boy. But you'll never be free from what you did. I'll make sure of that. The words grew darker, more erratic. Brielle will come crawling back to me one day. She loved me, she still does. You poisoned her against me. You took her away because you couldn't stand that she had something better. But she'll remember who really loved her, and when she does, you'll lose her all over again. By the time I reached the last line, my hands were shaking. You can't bury the past. It always finds its way home. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. My first instinct was to call Mark, to tell him what Nathan had written, but I hesitated. I didn't want to worry Brielle. She was finally smiling again, finally starting to heal. The last thing I wanted was to drag her back into that darkness. Still, the words lingered in my head for days, haunting me like a ghost. I tucked the envelope in a drawer beside my bed, thinking maybe if I hid it, it would lose its power. But some nights, I'd wake up and swear I could hear Nathan's voice echoing in my mind that same threat. You can't bury the past. A week later, Brielle came home early from work. She looked radiant in a way I hadn't seen in months, her hair pulled back neatly, her eyes bright with purpose. Mom, she said, I think I'm ready to do something brave. I smiled cautiously. What kind of brave? She held up a folded piece of paper. I wrote him back. My stomach dropped. Brielle, what? She nodded, her voice steady. I saw his letter. You didn't hide it very well. I sighed, closing my eyes briefly. I didn't want you to see that. It was nothing but hate. I know, she said softly. But I needed to. I needed to see what kind of man he really was, not the one I loved, but the one who destroyed everything we had. What did you say to him? I asked quietly. She took a deep breath and unfolded her letter, reading aloud. Nathan, I'm not your victim anymore. You don't love me, you love control. My mother didn't ruin you. You did that yourself. I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your poison anymore. Her voice trembled, but she kept going. You'll never have the power over me again. I hope one day you find peace, but it won't be through us. Goodbye. I didn't realize I was crying until she finished. My throat tightened with pride and sadness all at once. Oh, sweetheart, I whispered. That was perfect. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. I'm not going to send it, she said. I just needed to write it. To let it go. That night, we sat on the couch, the soft hum of the TV in the background. Brielle fell asleep beside me, her head resting on my shoulder. For the first time in a long while, she looked peaceful, truly at rest. I reached for her letter, folded it neatly, and placed it beside Nathan's. Together, they felt like two sides of a coin, one written in bitterness, the other in release. I knew Nathan's words would fade with time, they always do. But Brielle's her strength, her choice to forgive that would last. I finally understood something I'd been missing all along. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's freedom. It's not about erasing the past but taking back the power it once held. I looked down at my sleeping daughter and felt something deep inside me shift. A quiet peace, a small light finally breaking through the shadows that had followed us for so long. And then, just as I began to drift into that fragile calm, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just a gentle, deliberate sound. My heart skipped. At that hour, no one ever came by. And then, unexpectedly, a knock on the door brought a new chapter waiting to begin. When I opened the door, I saw someone I hadn't seen in 20 years, my old college friend, Ryan. At first, I couldn't even process it. The hallway light flickered faintly behind him, and for a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But then he smiled that same easy, boyish smile I remembered from our university days, and I knew it was real. "Julia?" he said softly. "It's been a long time." "Ryan?" My voice trembled, half in disbelief, half in joy. "What are you doing here?" He laughed quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I saw your story on the news. Everyone did, I guess. I wanted to check on you, make sure you were okay." I blinked, still stunned. "After 20 years?" He smiled. "I never stopped caring, you know." I stepped aside to let him in. The familiar warmth of his presence filled the room almost instantly, like sunlight finding a forgotten corner. He hadn't changed much, a few more lines around his eyes, a little gray at the temples. But his kindness was the same. He'd always been that way. Steady, gentle, safe. Brielle stirred on the couch when she heard his voice. "Mom? Who's—" She stopped mid-sentence, her tired expression brightening with curiosity. "Oh. Hi." Ryan smiled at her. "You must be Brielle. Last time I saw you, you were— what? Maybe 5 years old?" She laughed faintly. "Then I guess I owe you a proper introduction." He chuckled. "No introduction needed. Your mom talked about you all the time back then. I feel like I already know you." Brielle gave me a teasing look. "You did?" I rolled my eyes, blushing. I might have mentioned him once or twice. Ryan grinned, and the years between us melted away. He told us he'd moved back to town recently after retiring from teaching literature at a university in another state. "When I saw the news," he said, "I couldn't believe it was you. You always hated the spotlight." "Still do," I admitted with a laugh. "The whole world seems to know about us now, and all I ever wanted was a quiet life." We sat around the kitchen table, drinking tea and talking until the hours slipped by unnoticed. Ryan asked about everything, about Daniel, about Brielle, about what life had been like after we lost him. There was something comforting about the way he listened, never interrupting, never judging. Just there. When I spoke about the struggles, the nights I'd cried silently, the sacrifices, the loneliness, he didn't pity me. He looked at me like I was someone who had survived a storm. At one point, he reached across the table, his hand brushing mine. "You're still the strongest person I know," he said quietly. "Even after everything." I felt my cheeks flush. "Strong doesn't mean unbroken, Ryan," he smiled softly. "Maybe not, but it means you kept standing." Brielle excused herself to bed not long after that, leaving us alone in the soft glow of the kitchen light. We fell into the kind of conversation only two people with history can have, easy, familiar, full of laughter and unspoken understanding. "Do you remember that poetry contest in senior year?" Ryan asked, chuckling. "You swore you wouldn't enter, then beat everyone, including me." I laughed, covering my face. "I still feel bad about that." "You shouldn't," he said. "That poem was incredible. I think I still have a copy somewhere." We talked about the years we'd lost, how he'd gotten married, then divorced, how life had taken him in one direction and me in another. Yet, sitting there, it didn't feel like time had stolen anything. It felt like it had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. When he finally stood to leave, he paused by the door. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "Maybe dinner? Or just coffee? No pressure." For the first time in a long while, I felt something stir inside me. something I hadn't felt since Daniel was alive. Hope. I'd like that, I said softly. Very much. Over the next few weeks, Ryan became a quiet, constant presence in our lives. He'd stop by after work with groceries or surprise us with takeout. Sometimes he'd bring books for Brielle novels about healing, love, and strength, and they'd spend hours discussing them while I listened from the kitchen, smiling to myself. He wasn't trying to fill Daniel's place. He never even hinted at it. He simply met us where we were broken, healing, learning to trust again, and gave us space to breathe. One Saturday, he invited us to a small park just outside the city. The trees were beginning to turn, their leaves catching the early hues of autumn. Brielle took photos while Ryan and I walked slowly along the trail. You look peaceful, he said, watching me with a soft smile. I feel peaceful, I admitted. For the first time in years, he nodded. You deserve that. There was a quiet between us then, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm, full of the kind of connection that doesn't need words. When he dropped us off later that evening, Brielle leaned over and whispered, "He likes you, Mom." I laughed, blushing like a teenager. Oh, hush. But the truth was, I liked him too more than I wanted to admit. Weeks turned into months, and that fragile piece started to bloom into something solid. Brielle began volunteering at the community center full-time, and I started painting again, something I hadn't done since Daniel died. It felt like rediscovering a piece of myself I thought was gone forever. Ryan and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into something that felt both new and familiar. He never rushed it, never pushed. He just showed up, again and again, until being around him felt as natural as breathing. Then, one evening, as we walked home from a quiet dinner downtown, I saw movement near our building. A shadow standing by the gate, half hidden in the streetlight. Ryan noticed it too. Do you know them? He asked quietly. I squinted, my heart skipping a beat as the figure stepped forward. Even from a distance, I recognized the face. Diane Caldwell. Her expression was different this time, no longer angry, no longer proud. Just hollow. But one evening, as Ryan and I walked home, I saw someone unexpected waiting near our house. Diane was back, but this time, she looked broken and defeated. She stood near the gate, her shoulders hunched beneath a beige coat that hung too loosely on her frame. Her hair, once immaculate, was pulled back into a messy knot, and her makeup was smeared, as if she'd been crying for hours before finding the courage to come. The woman who had once commanded every room she entered now looked like she was fighting just to stay upright. Ryan instinctively stepped in front of me, his protective side surfacing without thought. Julia, he said quietly, do you want me to tell her to leave? I shook my head, eyes fixed on Diane. No, I murmured. If she's here, there's a reason. We walked closer until her eyes met mine. They weren't cold anymore, they were hollow, empty, and tired. I didn't know where else to go, she said, her voice hoarse. Everyone's gone. The lawyers, the friends, the people who used to answer my calls, they've all vanished. Her words trembled in the cold air, and for the first time, I saw her not as an enemy but as a woman stripped of everything that once defined her. What do you want, Diane? I asked softly. She took a shaky breath. Forgiveness, she whispered. The word hit me harder than I expected. Forgiveness. From the same woman who once ordered guards to drag me out of my daughter's wedding. From the same woman who sneered at my simple dress and my modest life. I felt Ryan's hand on my shoulder steady, grounding as I tried to find the right words. Why now? I asked. Her lips trembled. Because I finally understand what it's like to lose everything. To have people look at you like you're invisible. To realize that the things I valued, money, power, reputation, mean nothing when your heart is empty. She looked at me pleadingly. You were right, Julia. I see it now. Nathan's in prison. Richard's company is gone. Our name means nothing. And I don't even know who I am without it. I swallowed hard, torn between anger and pity. You hurt a lot of people, Diane. You tried to destroy my family. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know. And I hate myself for it. I was so focused on protecting my family's image that I forgot what family even means. Ryan stayed silent, his expression unreadable. He wasn't one to judge, but even he couldn't hide his unease. I glanced toward the apartment window, where I could see the faint outline of Brielle peering through the curtain. She's watching, I said quietly. You should talk to her too. Diane's eyes widened slightly. She'd never want to see me again. Maybe not, I said, but you owe her the chance to decide that for herself. I motioned toward the door, and after a long pause, Brielle stepped outside. Her hair was loose, her face calm but wary. The moment she saw Diane, her expression softened not with affection, but with a quiet strength I hadn't seen before. Mrs. Caldwell, Brielle said evenly. Diane's voice broke. Brielle, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed to see you. To tell you how sorry I am. For what my son did. For what I did. I stood by and watched you suffer, and when you needed kindness, I gave you cruelty. Brielle listened in silence, her eyes glistening. Diane took a trembling step closer. You were good to Nathan. Better than he ever deserved. And I ruined that. I told myself I was protecting him, but all I did was destroy him. I destroyed all of us. Brielle nodded slowly. You did, she said softly. But I think you already know that. Diane looked down, sobbing quietly. I've lost everything, my home, my friends, my husband, my son. I have nothing left. For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. Then Brielle stepped forward, her voice calm and sure. You still have your choices, she said gently. You can need to live the rest of your life angry at the world, or you can start again, be better. That's all any of us can do. Diane looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. You'd show me compassion after everything I did to you? Brielle's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. Forgiveness isn't about you. It's about me. I don't want to carry hatred anymore. It's too heavy. Tears streamed freely down Diane's cheeks now. She nodded weakly. You sound just like your mother. Brielle glanced at me, and I felt my throat tighten. I learned from the best, she said. For a long time, none of us spoke. Diane stood there trembling, the cold wind tugging at her coat, her tears glistening under the streetlights. When she finally turned to leave, she looked back once more. Thank you, she whispered. Both of you. We watched her walk down the street, her figure small and fragile beneath the glow of the lamps. It was strange seeing the woman who once wielded such power now reduced to nothing but regret. Yet, somehow, it didn't feel satisfying. It felt sad. Ryan broke the silence first. That took courage, he said, looking at Brielle. Brielle nodded. She didn't expect forgiveness. That's what made it real. I put an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. Your father would be proud of you, I whispered. She leaned against me, her voice soft. I hope so. As we turned back toward the apartment, Mark's car pulled up to the curb. He stepped out, smiling faintly when he saw us. Everything okay out here? I nodded. It will be. He looked from me to Brielle, then to the empty street where Diane had disappeared. You handled that better than most people would have. Sometimes, I said quietly. Letting go is the only way forward. Mark smiled. The kind of smile that carried pride and peace all at once. Then you're both finally free. I looked up at the night sky calm, clear, and wide open, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I truly believed it. And as I watched my daughter walk away from the past, I realized what true strength looked like. A year later, Brielle got married again this time, in a small garden ceremony with genuine love. The morning sunlight spilled gently across the garden, bathing everything in a soft, golden hue. White roses lined the path, their petals glistening with dew, and the air smelled of lilac and freshly cut grass. There was no orchestra, no reporters, no grand ballroom or glittering chandeliers. Just family, a few close friends, and the sound of birds singing softly in the distance. Brielle stood by the mirror in a simple lace gown, elegant, but nothing like the extravagant dress she wore the first time. This one reflected who she was now, grounded, calm, and radiant in her quiet confidence. Her hair was curled loosely, pinned with a small pearl comb that had once belonged to me. When she caught my reflection in the mirror, she smiled. "Mom," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm really doing it again." I walked over and took her hands in mine. "You are," I said. "And this time, you're doing it for all the right reasons." She laughed nervously, blinking back tears. "I still can't believe I found him." "Adam's a good man," I said warmly. "Your father would have liked him." At the mention of Daniel, her eyes glistened. "Do you think he's watching?" I smiled gently. "I know he is." Ryan was outside, helping Mark set up the last of the chairs. Over the past year, he had become a steady presence in our lives, patient, kind, and full of quiet understanding. We hadn't labeled what we were, but the comfort we shared spoke louder than any words could. Mark, too, had remained close, his protective instinct never fading. He often joked that between the two of them, I'd never have to lift a heavy box again. The ceremony was held beneath an old oak tree in the middle of the garden. A small wooden arch, wrapped in ivy and soft white flowers, stood at the front. Adam waited there, looking at Brielle the way a man should look at the woman he loves, not like she was a prize, but a partner. As the music began, a simple acoustic guitar, Brielle took my arm. My heart swelled as we began walking down the short aisle together. Guests turned to watch, their smiles genuine, their applause soft and warm. "Halfway down," she whispered. "You sure you're okay doing this?" I squeezed her arm. I've never been prouder. When we reached Adam, I placed her hand in his. "Take care of her," I said, my voice catching. "I will," he promised with sincerity. The officiant began to speak, his words light and filled with warmth. As the vows unfolded, I couldn't stop the tears from spilling down my cheeks. This wasn't the opulent chaos of a wealthy family's spectacle. This was love pure and unpretentious. Brielle's vows were simple but beautiful. "You showed me that love isn't about control or perfection," she said to Adam. "It's about kindness, patience, and laughter, about weathering storms together instead of causing them." Adam's voice trembled as he replied, "You've taught me that real love doesn't demand, it gives. And I promise to give you my heart every day, in small ways and big ones." When they exchanged rings, the small crowd clapped softly. As the officiant declared them husband and wife, Brielle let out a joyful laugh and threw her arms around Adam's neck. The applause that followed wasn't forced, it was full of warmth and relief, as if everyone present could feel the weight of her journey lifting. Mark handed me a tissue, chuckling. "You're crying more than the bride." I laughed through my tears. Mothers always do. After the ceremony, the reception was held under a canopy of string lights. There was laughter, soft music, and the clinking of glasses. No press, no whispers, no tension, just love. Ryan found me sitting near the edge of the garden, watching Brielle and Adam dance barefoot in the grass. "You did good," he said softly, handing me a cup of tea. "She did better," I replied, smiling. He chuckled. "You both did." The evening breeze carried the scent of jasmine, and for a moment, I closed my eyes and listened to the laughter, the music, the sound of life moving on. It felt like peace, the kind I'd spent years searching for. Ryan leaned back in his chair, looking at the stars. "You ever think about what's next?" "For once, I don't feel like I have to. I just want to be here, in this moment." He nodded, his hand brushing against mine. We sat like that for a while, no words needed. Brielle eventually came over, her cheeks flushed from dancing. "Mom," she said, breathless. "Come join us." I shook my head, laughing. No, I'm too old for that." "You're not?" she said, grabbing my hand anyway. "Come on." She pulled me into the grass. And soon we were all dancing. Me, her, Adam, even Mark and Ryan. The garden lights twinkled above us like stars, and for the first time in so many years, I felt weightless. As the music slowed, Brielle hugged me tightly, whispering against my ear, Thank you for never giving up on me. I held her close, my voice barely a whisper. There was never a chance I would. When she pulled away, I looked around at the smiling faces, at the life that had blossomed from the ashes of what we'd endured. And in that moment, I felt Daniel's presence quiet, reassuring, proud. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I lingered in the garden alone. The moonlight bathed the grass in silver, and the oak tree stood tall, like a silent witness to everything we had survived. I thought about how far we'd come from humiliation and heartbreak to forgiveness and new beginnings. Life hadn't gone the way I planned, but maybe that was the point. Sometimes the path to peace isn't straight. It's jagged, unpredictable, but worth every step. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. The pain was gone. The fear was gone. All that remained was gratitude. And as music filled the air, I finally knew I wasn't being thrown out anymore. I was exactly where I belonged.